All right. So I'm going to bring up, I need to, oh, I do need to share the screen so that you can all see it. Okay, so there we go. So what I thought I would do is take you through this seminar that was paid for by Sabitas. You've heard me talk about that. Sabita is no longer around, but it was a San Bernardino city workforce development agency. And what they did is they paid us to go through and develop this seminar with a specific reason. And that was is that their job is to train people for the workforce, to get them ready to work, or to get them special training so that their wages, they're worth more money because they have more skills. They get a lot of money every year. There's still a county one that gets millions and millions and millions of dollars to do this work. And they do some pretty good work, but like many government agencies, of course, they waste some of it. They don't try new things a lot of times. They just kind of tend to go back to the same thing. They have a lot of money to spend, and it's a nonprofit board, and so they make their decisions the best that they can, etc. But in this particular case, what these innovative folks did at the city of San Bernardino was say, we don't have any jobs. Now this was a while ago. It was back in about 14 or 15, and they reasoned if there are no jobs, then if we can help businesses grow, they would hire people. It's like, wow, what a novel thought that if you grow your business, you can actually hire some people. So obviously we supported that. And what they did is they basically said, go out and try and help businesses grow. And if you can show that they hired people, then we can justify our fee to you to do something a little different than just training. And so that's where this came from. So they paid for this whole thing. So I think I'm thinking back, the cost per company was about $7,000. That's what we got paid to do this. And so I think there was a total of 5 or 6 workshops, 2 or 3 hours each. And so that was sort of the cost to develop and to deliver it. So you guys are getting this for free, just so that you know that I just didn't come up with this stuff off the cuff. This was actually something that was developed, and it was fortunately we had enough latitude to where it could be developed. We had already done a pretty large contract with them previously, and so this was sort of phase 2. We worked directly with the clients before, and we were able to show that in fact working directly, with clients to grow actually helped them grow, and we had enough people grow and hire new employees that we were able to provide one of the lowest cost improvements per employee compared to any of the other funding that they had ever done. And so therefore they allowed us to kind of take this, and instead of going and spending time in each individual shop, what we did is we put together a workshop, and then we went to the Sabita offices in downtown San Bernardino, and then we gave these programs. So you're going to get the benefit of all of that. I don't know how fast we'll go, but if you have questions, just interrupt, and we'll dig in a little deeper as you would like to. I kind of hate doing this in a lecture / seminar format because we do want to have an interactive discussion, so feel free to do that. Okay, so we're going to start at the basics. What in the heck is marketing? And for the most part, I've always felt that marketing is misunderstood. That's probably because my background in marketing was academic in nature. And as those of you who've taken a basic marketing class, you have a definition and so forth. But I think in the last 20 years, the definition of marketing has gotten a little messed up. Nobody really quite agrees. When I was doing the research on this, there were 6 or 7 sources with different definitions. American Marketing Association had one, another, the PRSA, the Public Relations Group had another one, academics had another one, and then they started disagreeing. So this is the one that I thought I would show you. Actually, there may be a couple in here. This is the one that American Marketing Association uses. Marketing is the activity, set of institutions and processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. I don't have a huge problem with that. It's pretty broad. It is broad, and I'm okay with that. But looking a little deeper, I wanted to figure out another perspective. And there's a guy by the name of Peter Drucker, who is probably the 2nd, 3rd, maybe the 4th most important business consultant in American history. And as a matter of fact, he's from the Inland Empire, because there is a Drucker School of Business out at Claremont. And so the Drucker School of Business is well known, and it kind of carries his legacy on. He's an interesting, really straightforward guy. I believe he immigrated from Russia or from Germany. And he was, I think, in psychology, but he got somehow into business, and he made an enormous impact on business, just enormous. So here's what he said. I didn't mention that he also developed the concept known as management by objectives, which I don't know if that's as hot in business schools as it was 10, 15 years ago, but it was a really big deal, and he's the guy who did it. So here is what he says. Because its purpose, business, because its purpose is to create a customer, the business has 2 basic functions: marketing and innovation. Marketing and innovation produce results, all the rest are costs. Now that's pretty radical. I mean, it's even radical today, even though it's been around for, I don't know, 10, maybe 20 years. This is basically saying that those of you, every one of you being in business or getting ready to go into business, you might think that administration is the deal. You might think that you need to have your accounting down and finance, and you need to understand management. Yeah, that's all true. But if you don't have the purpose of marketing and innovation, he's basically saying you don't get any results from any of the rest. I tend to agree with that. I think he's really right. It is really interesting to go in and sit down with the financial head, the CFO of a company, and basically say, have you heard of Peter Drucker? They all say yes. And then to be able to make this statement in front of them gives me a huge amount of satisfaction. Because basically it says, you think you're running the company by your financial statements, but you're not doing anything effective unless you're doing marketing and innovation. Well, most companies are not doing the best marketing they could do, and therefore they're just kind of sitting there vulnerable. So that's why it was a lot of fun to me. There's a huge paradigm shift. And so if you kind of go through this, you want to create a customer, and then you do the marketing and innovation, and then the rest are costs. The rest are all costs. In other words, those are costs that you have to take on, but you have to examine why you're taking them on. If you're not marketing, in other words, bringing customers to your product or service and creating new ones, then you're just spending money without a particular purpose. Pretty radical. So most of you may believe that marketing is a cost, but really it's the only thing that provides you with income. It is the investment, and the rest are all costs. So here's kind of an interesting example, you know, so like, well, revenue keeps dropping, so let's cut more salespeople. It's like, what? Wait a minute. The salespeople are the ones who are supposed to bring in the business. If we need more business, why would we cut salespeople? But who are the first people to get cut? Salespeople. Because why? Because they're easy to cut. They usually make more money than other people because they perform. If they're making money based on commissions, and somehow nobody appreciates the fact that they go out and create new business. And as a result, you end up with salespeople losing their jobs, and then it's self-fulfilled prophecy. You end up continuing to lose business, and then you continue to sell to get rid of your salespeople. So here's my definition of marketing. It's the profitable matching of an organization's resources with its customers' needs. So whatever your core competencies are, you have to, you know, that could be a product, could be a service. You got to match your customers with that, and they have to pay for it. There are lots of organizations that can give things away, and they don't make enough money, and therefore they're not really providing a true value. And the point here is you've got to match those two things together with the money in order for it to make any profitable sense and keep you in business. So a couple characteristics of marketing. First of all, it's a process. It is not a product. It is not a department. So many times people will say, well, I'm in the marketing department. Well, that's foolish, because marketing goes across the entire organization. Not everybody, but 60–80% of everybody has something to do with creating a product and getting it to the customer and shipping it. All of those things to actually drive the product into the customer's hands are done by all of these people. And the process then, you know, if you think about it a little differently, it's a lot more like the word management than it is like accounting. In other words, marketing department is not the opposite, or is not like an accounting department. It's like management, because it is a huge process that covers all departments. This is still not accepted by everybody, despite my efforts to try and proselytize it, I suppose. But more and more people are trying to, trying to get more folks involved in some piece of the marketing. So it includes planning, branding, research, execution, people skills across all departments. So here's kind of an illustration to really show you all of the pieces that are included in marketing. So if we use this red circle here as the marketing universe, let's take a look at all the processes. First of all, marketing position lies almost wholly inside the marketing function. But you've got like advertising and public relations here looks like I must have changed the size of this, or, oh, it's probably this computer. Anyway, I've got some straggling letters here. Sorry about that. But advertising, public relations, most of advertising is in the sphere of marketing. Some public relations falls outside. Some sales falls outside. Customer service, most people put that completely outside of marketing. But in fact, touching the customer is one of the main things marketing is supposed to be doing. It's more marketing than anything else. Product innovation, yes, you have engineering and you've got production and you've got other things that have a lot to do with product innovation. But the truth is, you want products that are innovated for your market niche. We'll be talking a lot more about that. So you want products developed from the demand side. You don't want to create products and go looking for customers, okay? The hardest thing there is to do is to create a product and then go find a customer. The easiest thing to do is to have a customer and create a product that they want. That's how really successful businesses do a good job. There are lots of examples, and you only have to look to Apple to see that happening over and over and over. yes, they did try and make big splashes in advertising from time to time, but for the most part, they just built new products their existing customers wanted to have, and it spilled over to everybody else. So planning has a lot to do with marketing, but a lot of times the marketing, head of marketing is not in the strategic planning meeting. Huge mistake, huge mistake. The research, of course, and then branding. So those are all the different pieces, and there are probably others too. So let's kind of de-departmentalize this. If we talk about core competency, what you can do well in your customer, I just sort of thought I would put these pieces here to show you how close they happen to be in terms of one versus the other. So something like inventory control, that's in the competency side, but customer service, that's all about the customer. And so if you look at these different functions, you can see how close they are to one pole or another. So if we start over here, accounting and finance, engineering, production, quality control, product design, those have a lot to do with your core competency. Just get that product built. Economics, now you're starting to get a little further away. Yes, it's important from a production standpoint, but it's beginning to get pulled over a little bit because a lot of what happens with customers in demand and supply really, that's what marketing and that's what economics is about. And so it begins to be pulled over by customers as well. Clearly, marketing research is in the middle, positioning is in the middle. The reason positioning is in the middle is because you have to match your core competencies with the customers, right? So it's right in the middle. Pricing, well, you have to know what your costs are in order to be able to know how to price it, and you have to know what your customers will pay for it in order to be able to know how to price it. So that's really both sides, strategic planning, clearly. And then we start to get pulled really over to the customer. It's aesthetics within your company, branding, etc. Campaign planning, direct marketing, advertising, promotion, sales, and customer service. So growing a business requires more than a good plan. It requires steadfast education. Now, this is Ross Perot. Many of you don't remember him. He ran for president, I don't know, 20 years ago. He's kind of a little interesting guy, but he was like a billionaire, started a company from nothing and turned it into a computer service company, and was very, very, very successful. He's the one that said, business is about execution, and I am the executioner. In other words, he actually expects results. And he expects people to come up with a plan and get it executed. Then he won't shoot you. Now that's maybe a little bit harsh in today's environment because there's a whole lot of kumbaya going on as far as employees are concerned. And obviously, we want all employees on the team. We want them to be effective and productive and so forth. There isn't quite the steadfast issue of if you can't get your job done, we're going to find somebody who can. That's not quite as harsh as it used to be. But there are other ways of finding people, helping people get the job done. It still has to happen, or you simply don't make any money and you go out of business. And so if you don't do this as a business owner, get your people to be productive, you won't make it. So you have to learn how to do that. And of course, there's this old statement, you can't get to where you need to be by going where you've already been. Well, if you've been really successful, I guess that's not true. But there are not very many small businesses that have been really successful, that are multimillionaires, that are really, affecting their communities and supporting nonprofits and have plenty of money to be able to do that. There are a few, and they're very, very generous people, but there are a lot who can't participate at that level. Okay, so we kind of look at this, business is finding a customer and innovation. Everything else is a cost. Marketing is a process, not a department or a function. It's an art and a science. It really requires both sides of the brain because you're talking about math and analytics on one side, and you're talking about creative on the other side. And for the most part, it's unusual to find individuals who have all of the skills to do all marketing. One of the problems for marketing folks is they tend to believe that they can do that, and there are not very many people who can really bridge the gap and do both sides. It's a process, and it needs planning, and then planning, of course, needs execution. So, okay, now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about business failure. What we don't have on here is disruption, and that can certainly cause business failure. And we'll be talking more about that in our next session, 2 o'clock. Of course, you got recessions and competition, you're undercapitalized, et cetera, but 3 out of 5 fail in 1 year, and 4 out of 5 fail in 5 years. What this is like a little bit is like throwing mud on the wall. And you've heard me say this, some sticks and some doesn't. I used to have a nice little automation to this, but it doesn't automate anymore. So I'll go through a couple of weird. Anyway, so some doesn't, some falls off. But the question here is, who are the business owners that stay? And why are there only a few that succeed and so many fail? And that's what this is really all about. So in order to figure this out, I started going through a whole process about maybe 20 years ago, trying to figure out, because I wanted to know, am I doing the best thing for my clients? I thought I was. I had some successful ones. I had finally grown to be able to have people who made money instead of a lot of startups and folks who are ready to fail. That's kind of how you start out in consulting. You get all the people who are failing, and then you try and save some of them. Then as you get some bigger ones who start having money, you begin to realize there's some differences in the way that they operate. I was really interested in that. And so I observed a lot of these principles myself. But The Millionaire Next Door is a book that really does a great job explaining who these people are. Now, it's an older book now. It's probably 12 or 15 years old. And there were 2 of them, so one's a little newer. But these, as far as I can tell, I haven't seen any change in this. Who are these small business people? Well, of the people who are millionaires, the largest group happen to be small businessmen. And I don't say businessmen to be sexist, Lucy. I say that because that's what the facts were at the time. Women are making big strides in business as well, and becoming more and more successful. But that's only really happened in reasonable numbers for 5 or 6 years, maybe 10 on the outside. So basically, it used to be men who were the successful ones. Now women are part of that group. Professionals, another group of these people are professionals who set up a business, both men and women. These are lawyers and accountants. A lot of really successful female accounting firms. And they're kind of business people, but they're also professionals. So it's a little bit different crew. Those are people who want to be a profession. Maybe they're an attorney or an architect. They want to be in a profession, but to be independent, they end up having to start a business. And so by default, they're business people. Some of them are not great business people. But that's another category. A small percentage of millionaires are corporate managers. And then a very small percentage are super rich, like actors and athletes and that sort of thing. So it's really skewed to these top 2 groups. Much largest group are small business, successful small business people. The second group are professionals. And then very, very small group of these people. Now, we see that the corporate managers make huge amounts of money. It's obscene. When Elon Musk got his last bonus, it was a stock bonus where they compensated him by saying, we're going to give you an option to be able to buy stock in Tesla, and we're going to allow you to buy it for $750 million. And then he can execute that or not. And he executed it. And the way I understand it, these numbers may not be perfect. The way I understand it is that he sold it for $1.5 billion, or he bought it at that price, and it was worth $1.5 billion. So he made $750 million. That's an option. He was allowed to execute the option because he hit goals that the board had set for him. Well, this is a way to make money, I'll tell you. You can make a lot of money that way. That's not what small business is about. Small business people want to run their own deals. They don't want to have to deal with boards. That's a bad idea. Every small business needs an advisory board. But they want to be left alone. It's a lifestyle choice. So they typically just want to own the whole thing, or maybe have one or two partners. So that's a whole different thing. So the salaries have been going up for large companies for, well, a long time. And it used to be that it was about 8 times more, and now it's, I don't know, 20, 25 times more than, say, the lowest average salary. It's gotten a little bit out of hand. This is not the case necessarily with small business people. Okay, so it's if you're interested in making money, and many small business people are not, that's not their primary motivation, this is a good place to be. Those who are small business millionaires explain their characteristics like this. They have integrity. They're honest with all people. They are disciplined. They apply self-control, and it's hard for many to do that, but they figure out somehow how to do it. That's why we went through the time management session 3 or 4 months ago, because you've got to put together your plans, decide what you're going to do and what's important, and you know what? You got to execute. So a lot of small business people are not very good at this. They don't have good discipline, and they have to figure that out because the millionaires figured it out. They have social skills. They get along well with people. They have a very supportive spouse. They believe in hard work, not just to make money and not just because it's their business. They believe hard work is a lifestyle that is required in life, and they apply that to their work and their business. And that's another big reason why they are successful. And they do not gamble. They just don't gamble. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is being in business is a gamble already, but they know that the gamble of business is a lot better opportunity than almost any single form of gambling that there is. And they see all that as wasted money. They'd rather invest in their own business. Here's the profile: 57 years old, 3 children, 70% of them earn 80% of the household income. 2/3 are self-employed. A fifth are retired. It takes years to do this. A lot of them don't make the money until they're 50 or 60. Three-quarters consider themselves entrepreneurs. Most are not actual entrepreneurs based on my definition, but that's what they think of themselves as. Most of the others are self-employed professionals. As we talked about, the median income, this is a long time ago, $131,000. That, at the time, an average household income was probably about $40,000, $37,000 to $40,000 in that range. So they do well. What they don't tell you is that they don't live on that much money. They invest that back into the business. Only 13% of millionaires make more than $500,000 per year. Most of them make money cumulatively over time and through assets, as opposed to making big salaries. Very, very unusual to make more than $500,000, as you can see. Now, of course, Inflation since then has changed that. That's probably 750,000 today. 80% are the first generation affluent. One of the biggest myths in our country is that rich people beget rich people, and that's not true. When 80% are the people who make their own money, 80% of all wealthy people made their own money. It's very possible to do, and anybody who tells you that it's not possible to do is completely misinformed. They just do not understand the real economics, and they've listened to, well, political lies, actually. They live well below their means. They don't have very many mansions. They don't drive European luxury cars. That's because the money goes back into the business. That's where they want that money to work for them. So of the general population, only a small fraction, 4.9%, are worth $1 million. Now, again, we have to go back to 97. This is getting old. I should update these numbers. And so I'm going to say that in that period of time, it's probably $2 million. They're probably worth $2 million, and it's still 4.9%. So this percentage is probably more like, in fact, I'm pretty sure that this number is more like 9% today are worth $1 million. Now, worth $1 million, what is that? That's total assets. That's everything. That is not $1 million in liquid cash. That is your house equity, your property equity, your equity in your business that you can actually sell. Many of them can't sell it. And so then when you say, well, okay, well, who are these people? When you look at them, 25% are actually business owners. And so that gives you a sense. Some other things, we've covered some of these things. I'll run through them fast. Most trusted, the most trusted financial advisor is their accountant. They're self-described as tightwads. They want to get the best purchase, the best purchase for their money that they can. That's why they drive older cars. They buy and hold real estate and stocks. They don't do any kind of messing around with it. They do it for the long run. They're very strong planning and goal oriented. They spend twice as much time planning than underachievers, meaning those who are not going to make it to $1 million or $2 million. So planning. Okay. We're going to talk a lot about planning here in this next series. They're strong tax avoiders. Now, that doesn't mean they don't pay their taxes. That means they have their CPA working hard for them to figure out how to invest money and spend money in such a way as to avoid taxes as much as they possibly can. And it influences their decisions, and sometimes not wisely. So 17% attended high schools. Private high schools. 55% send their children to private schools. This is private, not private high schools, but 55% send their children to private schools. They are really strong in education. They're 2.9, and that's a little lower than you might expect. Most of them are very practical, and they believe that if you're passing the subject in college, if you're passing the subject, you got to get into college, so that's not true for high school. But if you get into college and you're going to be in college, that getting more too high of a grade takes too much time, and that's not a good use of time or money. And so they don't worry about high grades because they know that it's not going to mean anything once you get out. And I'd say that's generally true unless you're going to get a master's degree. Today, very few could get into a major university because their average SAT was 1190. It's gotten tougher and stronger. Of course, good news for them, California schools are not going to have SAT tests anymore. So I guess that means everybody gets in.
Nice.
Substantially devalue college educations over time. Was there a comment out there?
Oh, what was for self-described tightwad? What did you mean by a tightwad?
Oh, a tightwad is somebody who really
like cheap?
get the cheapest the most for the least money possible. So yeah, you
Oh, okay.
could say cheap because they're always going, hey, you know,
Todo.
you want $100. How about if I give you $90?
Oh, okay, guys.
Regateón y coro.
Yeah.
Yeah, bien codo.
Bien codo.
Okay.
It's a
And so,
Spanish slang for cheap quad.
yeah, what's the literal translation?
Tight. What? I don't even know how to translate that.
I would say codo.
But the meaning of Mexicans, we use or Latinos, we say that he's very elbow.
Elbow.
Yeah.
Makes no sense, but for us it does.
Yeah.
Elbowing people out of the way.
Yeah. You don't even have to say it. You just point out your elbow.
Telling the person that he's very cheap.
All right. Okay. They work 45 to 55 hours a week, integrate investment planning into their work lives. They build and manage their pension plans themselves. We can talk more about retirement, I guess, later. Let's say two things very quickly. Many of them own property and they use their businesses to help pay for it. And when their business careers are over, they've got property that's worth money. Many times their business is not worth very much. And so they've got it in real estate. The second thing is that they understand how to build cash flow streams. And they would prefer to have, say, rental apartments or bonds that have a certain cash flow on there, as opposed to do risky stuff by like playing the stock market and that kind of stuff. But they do buy stock. It's just that they buy and hold. They don't play the stock market. Most have about 20% stock. So you see, this is very low. 20% is not very much. You know, for people who are in corporate lives today, they have their 401ks, and you know, I think it does make sense to max out your 401k if you're working for somebody else. You want to max it out, meaning do as much as you can and as much as the employer will put in. But for the most part, because they're successful business people, they see better opportunities other places. This is the way I have prepared my retirement, is not based on stocks or assets and then using them up over the time and hoping you have enough money and you won't run out of money. I built mine based on straight income, income that will continue to come in and go up with inflation. Let's see, and then they use CPAs. They're not cheap when it comes to planning their taxes. So question, how did they become wealthy in one generation? Most found an economic opportunity that others ignored and pursued it with discipline. Now this is really your basic millionaire or the millionaire next door. And this matches up exactly with what I have found in my practice. So this is important. Opportunities others ignored, they pursued it with discipline, determination, and leadership. They don't follow the crowd. You actually want to go outside the crowd. That you don't go where others, you go where others don't go in both business and investing. They're very wise in selecting a vocation that was ideal given their abilities, aptitudes, and strong interest in becoming financially independent. And that can go from anything from a plumber to a doctor. All of those people all fit in this category. And when they're terribly successful, it's because they've done this. One of the wealthiest doctors that I know of was a blood doctor, basically. I can't remember what that's called, a hematologist maybe, but anyway, that's not right. And he ended up opening up a blood bank, and he just made millions with the practice in blood and with the blood bank. And then no, not a blood bank. It was actually a diabetes center where you would go in and have your blood purged, I guess, of too much sugar over time. So they had to go in over anyway, so much for that. But basically, the people who I know who are doctors made a lot of money because they were also business people. Okay, this is sort of fun. This is a little break. This is the banker talking to the business person. And it's like, look at it. Now he's pointing to these big buildings. You borrowers, so we own it all. You borrowers just run these businesses for us, the financial institutions. That is really, there's more truth in that than, it's like, it's sort of funny, but then on the other hand, it's just too close to being true. Sorry, Edgar, but that's kind of what banks are about. And it's the same for, insurance companies. Basically, the way that they utilize the money and they leverage the money is that it allows them to own title for all of the assets that they have. And so they're making money from interest. And if something goes wrong with it, they end up getting the building anyway, and they still make money off of that. So there's a reason why banks are so big and why insurance companies are so big. So just be mindful. It makes sense to borrow money in many, many cases. There's not a thing wrong with borrowing money. There's not a thing wrong with owning it outright either. But when you get into finance and you start thinking about how you could use it and how you should use it, there are several ways to do it. So there's not exactly a right or wrong answer there. Okay, what are the keys to each building wealth from 3 authorities? So here they are: market positioning, finding an underserved market, go where others do not. So there's number 1. Execution. You got to execute the marketing plan. And you have to have discipline, tenacity, and you have to do it. And you have to do it over and over. People who are easily bored love to do the planning, and they hate to do the execution. And if you're a person like that, you've got to be very careful to make sure your employees are good at the execution. You may love doing it. If you're a plumber and you want to start a plumbing business, you might enjoy doing the plumbing and not really like doing the business stuff. Well, you can execute the plumbing and get the revenue. That's great every day, but you still have to have somebody who's going to have the discipline to make sure your books are done properly, and that you can sit down and spend the time and effort to understand how to grow your business and what the analysis would be. They deal with a course correction. The majority of men, this is Napoleon Hill, by the way, and Napoleon Hill is one of the books that I read. It was the very, very first guy who had an opportunity to really get to know the really wealthy people back in the teens and the 20s. And these are the people like the Rockefeller and the steel mill magnate and the folks that just made huge amounts of money. And this is what he learned in talking to them about how they were successful. The majority of men meet with failure because their lack of persistence in creating new plans to take the place of those which fail. So basically, they give it a try, they persist with a new plan, and they make the next one work. And so it's persistence and tenacity, as we talked about. Napoleon Hill is interesting because all of the other books that we read that are like the 7 Great Habits, those, they're all based on Napoleon Hill. He was the first guy that tried to figure out why people are successful. What drives business growth? Okay, and these are very similar to what we've been talking about. Marketing positioning. You got to carefully match core competencies and target markets. You need niche leadership. You need to be in the top 3 of your niche. In other words, your market share needs to be 1, 2, or 3 in your niche. If you're not, you're going to have a problem. You got to figure out how to get there and try and stay there. And then you need a constant increase of value, meaning you're going to increase the value to the customer by making improvements and innovation. And those are the characteristics that drive good marketing positioning. Executing the plan, professional level over creative level. For those people who tend to be on the creative side, it's important to do. but you've got to execute, and you have to be better in execution than you are in creative. Creative rarely makes any money, but consistency many times does make money. So you want to be a little careful about getting over creative as opposed to executing the plan. You want to do it, get it done, as opposed to be perfect or having perfection. The guys who made all of this money, Millionaire Next Door, basically did not think it made sense to have really big high grades. I mean, if they got them, that was fine. They didn't try not to, but they didn't feel like it was important to get really high grades. And the reason is it was more important to do it than it was to have perfection. They knew that they would learn more by creating relationships and being involved in the social aspects of college than by being an A student. And so they didn't spend their time being an A student. They spent their time doing things that actually, in many cases, you talk about the old boy network and the Harvard boys and all of that stuff. And there's still a lot of that that goes on, although women are part of it today. But you know, that those networks that are college driven are much more valuable for the rest of your life than getting the A. And so that's why these people fit this profile. You want to deliver value. We're going to talk a lot more about value over this process. And you want to operationalize the marketing process, meaning you don't want to just do marketing here and there and here and there. You actually want to have your plan, and you want to make sure that it is operationalized just like you would your factory. It has to be done in a consistent and an accurate fashion. And then, of course, you want to measure your performance and analyze and fix and start over if you didn't get it done right. So why do some businesses succeed? Well, they occupy a crack in the market with little competition, and one that is not so small that they actually do have customers in that crack in the market. You want to know how to find and serve customers, innovate to differentiate, creating value. Be fiscally conservative and able to attract and motivate the right people. That's important. We don't talk a lot about that, but that's important. Okay, and that's, of course, that's the book. So let's see, time-wise, we've got a few more minutes, and so I can begin to talk about any questions. Let's break it up. This is a good time to think through this. Any questions on some of these basic marketing things before we jump into another sub-subject? Okay, if not, we will move on. Okay, this is really something, I discovered this 10, 12 years ago. It's called PIMS, Profit Impact on Marketing Systems. Basically what it says is you need to be in the top 2 or 3 in your market, as I just stated, and you have to be perceived as a high value. In other words, a high quality and good service, product or service. Now, this is kind of interesting. I have been touting this for a long time, and people apparently don't listen to me because there are not very many people who understand this. I've got a book, I'm looking at it right now, the PIMS Principles, and it clearly delineates all of the stuff what came out of this important database project. They started it in the 60s. And it was put together by 12 of the really big companies, General Electric and others like that. Of course, that was back when General Electric was like the #1 company. So what they did is they built a database that was not financial in nature, because everybody has the reporting to for stocks. Public companies have to do all of this public reporting, but it's all financial stuff to make sure you're not getting, lied to or they're misrepresenting themselves. But they don't have marketing information or numbers there. And so what they realized is we need to be able to take a look at the profit impact on marketing in order to be able to know how to grow. And so they began to put marketing numbers into this database called the PIMS database. They had some consultants who ran it and then reported on it, and it went on for many years. It is still in existence today. So it's probably the largest database, however it's large companies, but it's probably the largest database on marketing numbers that there is. Now, the internet is changing this a little bit because now companies like Google and Facebook have all kinds of marketing numbers. They're focused on the internet, however. They're not focused on some of the other things like investing in a new niche, investing in a product. What was the return on investment in a new product for a specific niche? That's the kind of questions that they asked. And so these are the results from that. And it's really quite telling. Now, does this apply to small business? And I think the answer is yes, it does apply to small business. Because I have investigated this over many years, 12, 15 years, and I have found it to be the case probably 90% of the time with small business. And so that's why it's relevant here. It's also something that is just not known. This is a secret. This is a secret success to profitability. So I obviously want you guys to take advantage of this. And here's kind of what it is. It's leadership in the market. When you are the leader in the market, meaning, I don't know, any product you want to think, toothbrushes. If you're the biggest toothbrush maker, you're number one or number two in your market, that has a huge impact on your ability to stay in the market and to be able to reach customers and to be able to sell more and grow. And then the second principle is that competing on quality is better than competing on price. In other words, don't sell cheap toothbrushes, sell good toothbrushes. Now, so when we just a little bit of well, here's some more findings, I should say. So the data that categorizes firms by customers, and then if you rate them better or worse for service, those that were rated better were able to charge more for the same goods. Well, that makes sense. If you have a better product, you can get a little bit more money for it. Those that were rated better grew twice as fast as those that were not. Those that were rated better picked up a 6% market share per year. Think about that. I mean, if you only had 6% and you grew by 6%, and then you grew again, now you're at 18% already, you're going to be, if you continue to do that, you're going to end up being the highest market share in a matter of a few years if you can maintain that. Those that were better had a 12% higher return on sales, 12%. These are big numbers. These are the kinds of numbers that keep some people in business and drive other people out of business. And so here's one of the reasons people fail. They go into a business with lots and lots of competitors, and they're not substantially better at anything. And therefore, they don't win. And what happens is that the people who win, who can get the business, make more money, and they can invest more money and drive you out of business. They create more innovation. They have better stores. They have better delivery trucks. Everything they have is better. And as a result, they get bigger because the customers continually see this investment in value. And so they pay for value. So, so quality is a consistent indicator. Profit impact of market attractiveness creates a real market growth, which helps profitability a little bit, but investment intensity hurts profitability a lot. In other words, if you are in a market that requires huge investment, that you tend to spend all of your money on that, and therefore it hurts return on investment. Whereas when you grow your market, you can increase your profitability. And so when you invest in growing your market, you're getting a little bit of help. But here's the real kicker right here. This kind of shows the relative quality. Those who are market leaders, they have a higher perceived quality, and therefore they command higher prices. And so their profits 3 times what the small share markets enjoy. So you can see here that the return on sales versus return on investment, that if you are in the 20 percentile versus 40 versus 60 versus 80 percentile, that those who are in the top 20%, it says 100, but it's really, yeah, the top 20, you can see how much more return on investment. Now you look, well, it's just kind of a gradual step. Whoa, wait a minute. That's 15% and that's 32%. Wow. You want 15% return on investment, or you want 32? Well, you realize if you're getting double the return on investment, that turns into a huge amount of money that goes back into your product and growth. This is a big deal. So let's look at these 2 dimensions now at once. So here we have the quality dimension. Inferior is low and superior is high. And then on the other one, we've got market share. These are the top 2 or 3 in market share, those in the middle, and those who have a very small share. If you're better on both of them, you end up here. And so here's the magnification. This guy right here, if I read this chart right, his return on investment is 5%. This guy's return on investment, about, well, almost 40%. I mean, you guys get this? It's like from 5 to 40% return on investment. It really pays to be your market leader. And that's why it's important to have a niche that is small enough for you to dominate it and to focus on quality.
Hey, Ron, when you say in a niche, it only means the niche as in the product, or can it be location as well?
Yeah, the niche includes location, geography. We're going to go through that. Might be today, and if not next time. We're going to go through all of the different characteristics of a niche. And yes, like you guys are in a niche because of what you do. There aren't a lot of people there. And because you serve this geographic area, that further refines your niche. And so, you know, you guys are a pretty good example of a niche business. Pretty, yeah. You know, what to use the other example, we'll say Red Fusion. Red Fusion was in a niche when it started. We had a very specific niche goal, and that was to be, I mean, Red Fusion was never just a web company, but that's where most of the business ended up coming from, just because that was the days when everybody was needing to add a website to their marketing. So our first niche was, we'd like to be the biggest web designer in Redlands. That seemed like something that was achievable. And when we looked around, there were only 3 other designers in town. Well, they were technical people. They didn't have good quality designers in terms of aesthetics. They didn't understand anything about marketing. And so, you know what? Because that was our core competency, all we had to learn was the technical side of building a website. And that was so easy to achieve. It was really surprising. And so then we said, well, let's see if we can't stretch this out a little bit. Why don't we do Loma Linda, San Bernardino, Highland, and let's see if we could become the #1 business in that one. Well, the same thing happened, but there was a lot more competition. There was a pretty good sized guy in San Bernardino. They happened to get a contract for the local schools, and so they were awfully busy for a few years until the schools kind of got wise to what was actually happening there. And there were 3 or 4 other pretty competent ones, but we just continued forward and we expanded into San Bernardino, joined the chamber, did marketing over there, etc. And we were able to achieve that in about 18 months. And so that kept us growing very rapidly. And then we decided, well, let's just see if we can do it for the whole Inland Empire. thinking that's just a little too much. But because of the nature of the internet, it's like, well, you can't really restrict yourself to San Bernardino and Redlands and Loma Linda and Colton. You know, how do you restrict your geography there? And so we were already beginning to get business from around. And so just because of the opportunity we had, and because of these principles here, we had more money to hire more people. And therefore the waiting time to build a website, you know, ours was at one point, it was like 10 days. And we always did updates literally in no longer than 2 days and usually in 24 hours. So, I mean, we had the people who knew how to do this stuff, and as a result, we became the #1 website builder in terms of quantity of websites in the entire Inland Empire. Being able to dominate the market like that, I mean, we became known as the company to do that. And I only tell you that just because it's an example of intently trying to achieve a market niche and proving that these principles work. And so I've used these, done this in my own business, but I also did this in the retail business. This is exactly what we did in the retail business. I just didn't know what I was doing in those days. I knew that I had to be different than everybody else because I couldn't compete directly with them on exactly the same merchandise. But that's kind of all I knew, is just like, stay out of the way, keep your head down, don't get in the way of the big stores. That's the way we did it, but it turned out being exactly what I'm talking about right here. So yeah, this is a key principle. And despite the fact that there's a book that was written and it was reasonably popular, it's very difficult to find the book today. I own several copies because I wanted to try and maintain the niche on that. It's been out of publication for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. We had to go copy off the original book out of the university library in order to be able to get the first pieces of it. So anyway, and that's a long story. Okay, so this is why your own crack in the market is important. And that is because of PIMS. When you achieve it, customers pay more for your product. You'll come out of a recession faster. That includes a pandemic. You'll sustain faster growth, and you'll be rewarded with more loyalty. So all of the things you try to do as a small business person are rewarded when you pay attention to the PIMS and positioning and your market crack. This was the reason I wrote the book, is because I realized that this was so important, and it's all backed up by this giant database. Now, the interesting thing is the consultants today don't talk about it because they know that the value in the database in these principles is way more than the value of writing a book to tell people about it. And so this stuff can only be found today by hiring these big consultants, and they only work with the big companies. So review the PIMS principles, and then we'll sort of wrap it up. So you want to seek to be in the top 3 in your market share or your crack in the market. You want to strive to be perceived as high quality in service. Now, perception is reality in marketing. If people think you have the best quality, you have the best quality. Whether or not you scientifically have the best quality is immaterial. With Longmont Dairy, the milk is very, very good. And it is as fresh as anybody's, which is a good reason why it is as good as it is. But discerning the difference between milk takes a really, really good taste tester. And not very many people can tell the difference. I can barely tell the difference myself, and I drink milk all the time. And so it's not so much that it is better scientifically, and they don't claim that. All they claim is what customers say. And customers say that milk tastes better in cold glass bottles. And of course, it's fresher because it's there within 24 hours. That's enough to create a perception as the highest quality. And that has worked very, very well in that particular case. So we can't really say it is higher quality, but we know the perception is that it is higher quality. And then finally, buyers make decisions based on perceived value. We'll talk more about perceived value, and I think that's next. No, okay. Yeah, so that goes into the next session. We have 4 or 5 minutes left, and I know we're on a little bit of a tight schedule today. So let's open it up about general ideas about anything about, marketing. What does it mean? Anything about the PIMS principles, questions. Would love to have some doubting Thomas say, no, I don't believe it, so we can talk about that. So let's open it up and see if you guys have any comments, questions.
For the PIMS principle review, the first bullet point where it says seeks to be in top 3 market share and crack in the market. If you have a product that you establish on a website, you have it internationally, does your market share now have to expand worldwide on achieving that top 3?
Yeah, good question. So if you sell, let's see if we can think of a good product. If you sell custom t-shirts and you go online, it's going to be very difficult to be able to be in the top of any t-shirt business. But if you sell t-shirts that say, something that's really obscure, some poetry or something like that, that nobody else has, then all of a sudden you've got all the way down at the SKU level, you've got an opportunity to limit your market down to something really very finite. Now, so you could say, we're the only ones that have this t-shirt, and so we dominate our market. Well, okay, but what about substitution? You've got to consider substitution. It's like people are not going to pay an outrageous price to be able to get your t-shirt because it says something on it. So if you've got a market that's so small and there are no customers in it, it doesn't do you any good to be the top 2 or 3 in the marketplace. And so it makes more sense to say, well, what's really unique about this? But for instance, the very first part of the t-shirt business that comes in that special material that wicks sweat away when you're hiking and that kind of stuff. I've forgotten what they call that. What was that?
Dry fit.
Yeah, that and so they're at the first market. Like, well, there you see, they just created a niche within a huge niche of t-shirts. They created a niche, and for a time they control that niche. Now, were they able to maintain that? It's hard to know. What about Under Armour? It's like that started off as underwear, basically, right? And while they were there, they controlled that market. You didn't find anybody else trying to sell shorts or tees in that business. And then because their brand was so strong, they were able to grow that into what is now a giant, billion-dollar company. But they started as a very small niche. And the reason they were able to grow and reinvest is because they had very little competition. I'm sure the big t-shirt guys, the big underwear guys, they looked at that and said, that's no big deal. We don't have to worry about those guys. And by the time they started worrying about it, Under Armour had already grown substantially. It's like Lululemon. There's another line. Nobody was like into the yoga pant thing. And some people thought, well, that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, you can only wear them at yoga, so let's not do that. Well, look at them now. Yoga pants are everywhere in the whole world. So, it exploded. The issue here is, were they able to maintain their start in the market? But if you start off as being in the top 2 or 3, at least you have an opportunity to take that money and reinvest that back into your business while you're trying to grow. And if you can invest it back in and begin to grow, now other people are interested in what you're doing. And their interest means that you can develop some capital and you can maybe even go public, like some of these examples that I mentioned have. But these all started as little teeny ideas. I mean, I've already told you the story about me buying the first two sneakers, for the Nike account. And so, who knew that Nike was going to be what it was? Nobody knew that. Nobody had any idea that Nike was going to do as well as they did. So they start with two shoes, and he was at the Los Angeles Apparel Mart, was set up with a card table when everybody else had a whole bunch of samples, and they had tables that were draped, and a lot of them actually brought in props, a lot of models in their rooms. They had posters, they had all this stuff. And here's one guy who shows up with two shoes trying to compete with Puma and Adidas and all those other people. It's like, well, how can you make that work? Well, they made it work because they did something that was totally unique. They created a new niche. And what was the niche? They had a forward motion shoe and they had a lateral motion shoe. Now, what were all of the shoes prior to that? They were sneakers or tennis shoes. So we lived in a world with sneakers and tennis shoes, and they came up with a new niche, and which is a new world, which is if you're going to be running, you need forward motion shoes. If you're going to play basketball, you need lateral motion shoes. You can't use the same shoe for the two things. That's how they started. It was a really simple idea. And I know that's the case because the owner of the company told me that personally. So I bought his first two shoes and I ordered my first two reorders. He called me personally on the phone and said, "Hey, did you sell any? And can you buy some more?" And that's how it went. Well, you all know what's going on with Nike now. It's the #1 stolen tennis shoe in the riots. I shouldn't say tennis. Forward motion, lateral motion, every kind of shoe in the world. And so they're still that way. If you look really closely at their line, which is just enormous, even understanding the line is hard now because it's so big. But if you look carefully at the segments of that marketplace, they have lots of sub niches inside their basic niche. And they know they're going after the high end, guy on the street, the real basketball player, the one that wants to look like a basketball player, the Jordans, and then you've got another entirely different group of people that have to do with football shoes and with forward motion shoes and track shoes. They've just got so many niches. And so, having watched them all of these years since 1975, I think it was, or six, I saw them add not style by style by style. They added niche after niche after niche. They filled the niche. That's all they did. They used this exact principle to be able to build one of the most amazing and profitable and substantial businesses in the history of mankind. So there you go. So we're going to talk a lot more about that, Christian. Good question. Okay, well, we're about there. We do need to go. Is there anybody who has one more wrap-up question or comment?
I don't have a question, but I just had a comment about what you had mentioned earlier in the slide. All great content again, but investment, looking at it as an investment as opposed to an expense or line item. And as I switched hats from being a financial consultant and down to business and marketing consultant with the way the internet had changed those figures, how you had mentioned 40% return on investment. I mean,
Yeah.
You can triple and quadruple those numbers now with the help of internet and social media if you know what you're doing. As I talk to these businesses, it's always costs. How much does it cost? How much does it cost? I was like, well, I don't want to get into the cost yet because you're not going to perceive the value of what I'm going to be providing. And you don't need to know the technical side of things, but you got to understand and look at it as an investment to your business. And if you are capable of handling more business, then there's a certain amount of money, and these metrics and these analytics will over time show you how much that return on investment is. If I pump in, say $1,000 a month, am I going to get 3 times that back, or am I going to get that 40% or whatever that return on investment is? And
Right.
and everything positive about it is, even no money, if you break even, as long as it's branding your business, it's still, a return on investment for bringing that customer in. Now, the second round, if it's consistent, then that's where you might be having that return on investment turnover. So it is a great slideshow because it all kind of just tied in where it's the marketing is, I mean, cutting salespeople down. Like, you could really have your marketing replace those salespeople with the strength of the internet and Google and Facebook. And I just see it as if you go to Vegas and you know how to play poker, you got a better chance of winning. And I'm speaking as far as the internet marketing, but I think going based off of this conversation and all of the different creative side, you got the copywriting side, you got all these departments within marketing in itself, and you mentioned how special it was for somebody to pull that all together. Like, if you know how to gamble at the tables with putting your money into a marketing machine, you're going to get a certain amount of money back out. So I just wanted to kind of summarize it and look at my take home points and understand that it really is an investment, and you're invested into yourself, you're invested in your employees, you're invested in your business. And what is your return on investment? And it goes based off of your quality and your customer service. So great presentation, Ron.
Good. Thank you. Well, yeah, these are sort of like the keys, and we're gonna start going through now and dig deeper into all of these other things, as well as talk about value. What is value, and how do you tell what value you should be focused on? Because it's one thing to say, well, here's what I want to do, and yet remember, we still have to get the execution part right. And so we're going to talk a lot about execution and how do you actually do this stuff. It's not as easy to do as people would hope that it is, because it takes an awful lot of work to do these things. And those who are trying to buy marketing services, internet or otherwise, many times they don't have an appreciation for what it takes to get the job done. And that's because so much of the time they have been, the products have been misrepresented to them about what they can really do. And they don't ever see that. That's also because the media people don't properly give them the feedback to show them that it did work. I think the biggest lie probably in marketing as a whole has basically been advertising in magazines and newspapers. Now that's largely changed over the years because of the internet and what people are realizing is working and not working. It changed for one reason, and that is those of us who are on the digital side of things said, why aren't you measuring the impact of marketing in your business? We just ask a simple question. And the answer was never, that they could never figure out what the impact was. And slowly they began to realize that they could spend the price of one big ad campaign, not one medium, one small ad campaign, depending on your marketplace, on a website, and you're gonna have traffic forever. Whereas, once that newspaper or magazine goes into the trash, it's like, sorry, that money is not only maybe didn't work, it's spent, it's over, it's done. If you can have a website that is going to keep working for you when you're sleeping, that makes it feel like the investment's just a little bit better. And so, yeah, the metrics have changed a little bit, but the problem, I believe, comes from a basic lie that advertising has not worked. And the guy by the name of Wanamaker, who had one of the most important and successful stores back around the turn of the last century, in the 1910s, 100 years ago. Wanamaker's was one of the really big ones. And he said, I know my advertising works. I know half of my advertising works. I just don't know which half. And so, he felt like he had to continue to advertise, but he had no idea how to make it better or how to figure out what wasn't working. And he never, as far as I know, he never did. But he managed to keep advertising because in those days, that was the game. Now, radio came along and changed the game, and TV came along and changed the game, and now the internet's changed the game. So the whole thing has changed a lot. But there are a lot of skeptical people because inherently they can't understand what works because a lot of it hasn't worked. So, okay, good. That was a good session. Thank you all. And don't forget to tune in and watch our panel coming up here at 2 o'clock.
All right.
All of you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks much.
How's the audio? Real quick, Ron, in this thing.
Very good.
Very good. Okay.
I'd say it's very good. Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right. Bye, Ron. Bye, everybody.
Guys, see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
Yeah.